Ladies and gentlemen, this is the next of our tutorials on the physical features of the Great Plains and how to survive the Great Plains. So we'll get to it. The question is how the people's perceptions of the use of the Great Plains changed after the Civil War. The original perception of the Great Plains was very negative. It was a very harsh place to live. It was a very boring place to live in. Most of the land was quite flat, unappealing to the eye. They did rise gradually as they got closer to the Rocky Mountains. That's the point. It's flatlands that rise gradually from east to west. You have a lot of erosion by wind and water. And erosion is never good because erosion causes topsoil for you to lose your topsoil. And topsoil is what you use to grow things. That's what plants need to gather nutrients. You had low rainfall, incredibly dry, and once in a while you would get dust storms. Now keep in mind, this ground, it's mostly consists of very dry sod, thick, dry sod and grass. So even if there were these good topsoil underneath these roots, you couldn't get to them because it's just so thick. There's so much grass. All right, and so eventually with new technologies at the end of the Civil War, the people's perceptions changed. They first saw it as a treeless wasteland. Couldn't live there. They didn't have the technology to settle it. But then with new technologies, they learned that they could actually live in this area. And these are the technologies I'm going to go over right now. And we did in class. We had a barbed wire, and it kept livestock in and wildlife out. Also establishes property borders. Remember, it's flat lands. There's some spots where you don't have any landmarks to divide lands. So you had to depend on some of these fences for that type of property border establishment. You had steel plow. It was a thick steel plow was strong enough, and it was designed because it was steel. Unlike cast iron plows, it would not collect dirt and mud and clay. It has a smooth surface. And wooden plows wouldn't be able to break that sod. So you had steel plows nice and strong, and it was smooth, and it worked really, really well. There's a strategy of farming called dry farming. What you do, you're growing crops that can survive long periods without water. Corn's one of them. Corn and wheat are grasses, and they actually thrive in areas where it would be grasslands. So why not grow it? And so we started to grow massive quantities of corn and wheat, and eventually that led to different inventions of food items like cereals and different types of breads and cereals and so forth. But the idea is that we had this huge abundancy of corn as people started to grow because it worked really well. To grow houses, there's no lumber, but there's plenty of thick sod around. And that sod could be used as bricks on a home. It was a great insulator. It kept you nice and cool in the cool in the summertime and warm in the wintertime. But it was a temporary housing. No one really wanted to live in the sod houses. I mean, these sod houses weren't comfortable. They're made out of dirt and sod, and you're going to get the critters that live in dirt and sod are going to come to your home. So it was quite common to have bugs and mice, and it would often leak in the winter in the rain. But it was a temporary solution until they could bring in the lumber. Beef cattle raising livestock. These livestock would be sold as meat in meatpacking industries. Of course, cows use grass. They eat grass, and so it's perfect condition for them. Excuse me. Wheat farming. Wheat is, as stated before, wheat's a grass, and we can produce a lot of it. And you have a lot of land to cover, and if you have a good harvest in a year, you can make some good money off of grain, selling grain. So it's basically growing mass quantities of wheat as a cash crop. You sell it to make money, so you can buy things. You can eat the flour you make, I'm sure, but you're not gonna make mass quantities of wheat for only yourself. So you sell it to people out east who can't grow their own wheat. There's an abundance of water underneath the ground in the Great Plains. A lot of networks of groundwater that's pure and clean. So there were rivers in the Great Plains, but they run very slowly, and bacteria can easily grow, which can make you sick. But groundwater is free of bacteria for the most part. It's clean, it's cold, and it's hard to pump out. If you're pumping with a regular pump, it takes a lot of work. So they used windmills to harness the wind to pump the water out of the well, which would allow you to make massive quantities of water for your cattle or for you to pick up for your daily usage. It was very convenient. And to get all these items like the steel plow and the windmills or windmill kits, you could use the rail line to transport that to you. And railroads were important. They shipped goods from east to west, and it also shipped goods from west to east. It allowed you to make money off of your corn and your wheat, and it also provided a safe transportation for people. Which brings us to railroads, advances in transportation. Sorry, did it again. Brings us to railroads, advances in transportation. So we had the railroads, they moved natural resources such as copper and lead to eastern factories. These are copper and lead are essential elements that are necessary for industrial growth. You have transporting lumber from the Great Plains. And remember to get rid of those sod houses. Sod houses were a temporary solution. So if you use the wood from the Great Plains, they could send it there, build a regular home. That's how the railroad lines were useful. Coal and iron ore make steel, and rail lines would transport the iron ore and the coal deposits to steel mills in Pittsburgh. And they would again transfer the finished products to national markets. Whether it's Pittsburgh, you use coal and iron ore to make steel, and then that steel is transported to local cities for building development via the railroads. The railroads could also bring the market to the people by using catalogs, sending out catalogs. People could order something out of a catalog, and then they could send the rail line will take the money and the order, and then the rail line will then transport the item back to the person or to the customer via the rail line. So the rail line essentially is a network and a market in itself. It connects everything together. Without rail lines, you would not have a strong industry. You need rail lines to transport all the foods, the grains and the corn, the grain, all the way to the East Coast so the people could eat. And then you needed the people in the west side or the Great Plains who needed to have certain luxuries or items or even items of survival, building materials. They would depend on the East, the finished products of the East. The rail lines would then take that finished product of the East and bring it out to the West. It's just a collective network. The most important invention of the 18th century. Well, it was really more of I'm sorry, not 18th century, 19th century. The most important invention of the 19th century was the steam locomotive and the universal gauge of rail line track. Okay, so what this did, it made manufacturing cities. Let's see if we can get. I want to go back. All right, this made manufacturing cities, and people didn't build factories in small towns. They built factories in areas where they're located near centers of population. I believe there's a question on the test on this, so remember that. They would build their homes, or factories would be built on places where people already live, not in places where people don't live. Now, examples of manufacturing areas, you have the textile industry in New England, you have the automobile industry in Detroit, and you have the steel industry in Pittsburgh. And if you're having trouble trying to remember that, think about these sports teams. Textile industry, a sports team that uses textiles in New England, it would be the Boston Red Sox. The Boston Red Sox means Red Sox is textile. That's the textile industry. Automobile industry, Detroit Pistons, the basketball team, and the steel industry, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that is this last tutorial. Okay, I hope this all helps you. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions before the test.